Hello and welcome to the Bald Ambition Podcast. I'm your very bald host, Mookie Spitz. And the one with all the ambition today is Mr. Tom Joseph. He is the founder and treasurer of America's Main Street Party. It's a joy to have you on the pod today, Tom.
Thank you for having me on, Mookie. Pleased to be on your show.
As I understand it, you have a very, very intriguing proposal for the American electorate. And as backdrop, I don't think anything is more broken in America than our healthcare system, maybe our political system. And you've offered some amazing ideas, and you actually have a plan for fixing some of our polarization. The Citizens United problem of super PACs and funding. And I can't wait to just shut up and give you the mic to tell folks about your organization, about the technology-driven solution for essentially crowdsourcing political primaries and nominations. Tom, let us have it.
Mookie, that's a great way to frame it. I mean, just to take you back, I am not an academic or a political person. I'm a businessman who, during the COVID, was afraid that partisanship was going to kill us. And I've always had this thought about why are districts uncompetitive and nobody goes there. As a business person, you think an uncompetitive place is where you go. And it's really because the system is fixed. And there's really no way for a natural force to come in there, or at least there hadn't been. But I discovered a loophole that allows us to use a political party to create an alternate primary system, what we're calling a people's primary. And the loophole is that if a potential nominee, and I call potential nominee somebody who eventually wants to run for Congress, doesn't spend money, the process a political party uses to choose it doesn't fall under the purview of the FEC. They can do anything they want. And essentially what I'm saying, you won't fix the primary. We're going to create one, and we're going to make one completely free and equal, as originally written by James Wilson. That this would be a process that anybody can enter, and that you can filter candidates and choose them like you would on Match.com. So we're going to take modern technology and allow the people to actually choose their nominee and put that up against an incumbent Republican or Democrat, always an equal number, in these gerrymandered districts. Because gerrymandering is completely unfair. And I think we've come up with the gerrymander buster.
Let's establish context for just a second for our viewers and listeners.
Sure.
Set the stage for how primaries and party nominations take place currently. Identify a few of the key flaws that you've hinted at already, and then show us your delta. How are you going to fix these problems that are pretty self-evident?
Well, our votes are actually not stolen on election day. They're stolen when these super bills come before Congress, where the incumbent president and Congress pass this massive legislation, and there's all this kind of deal making done. And if people have heard of what's called their party whips, are the people that have a list of donors that will support their reelection and make it so that it is almost impossible for somebody to take them down in the primary. So they basically come into this primary election with 1,000 or a couple hundred, $2,700 checks. That makes it virtually impossible to unseat them unless they've done something so unpopular, like go against party leadership, that they'll try to primary them to the left or right, respectively. So that is the major flaw that we get rid of, because in our system, you're not allowed to spend your money, and you're not allowed to take super. You have to go through this nominating process. Once the people choose you, we would have our own super PAC that will back the candidate in the general election. So this is a way to use our political committee system in a very different way to restore basically the people's power. We just have to fund it differently. Our political party actually doesn't require a lot of funding. Eventually need a super PAC that will basically become our marketing department.
Now, for the sake of clarity, we're not talking about elections.
Correct.
We are talking about the primary process when respective parties, Democrat, Republican, even independent, presumably, libertarian, they go through these internal machinations to filter one pick who will run in that election. That's what we talk about nominating and running a primary. Now, your point, which I think is on point, that this filtering process is biased. The American electorate has very little, if any, say in it. And because it's so inherently limited and biased, we as voters at election time have such a limited selection to choose from that it's not really even an election. That these
Right.
party bigwigs, whether on the local, state, or even national level, are giving us a candidate and we choose one or the other. And as we know, in many cases, there's very little difference between the parties when it comes to key issues. So our voice is not being heard.
Right. And 90% of the elections are not competitive. There's kind of two things going on in these uncompetitive. There are districts that are naturally uncompetitive. They have not been messed with. And then there are gerrymandered districts. Our system is basically targeting where we can basically take opposition voters and have them vote for a pink or baby blue candidate on the other side rather than a navy or red Republican Democrat. And the idea is that there'll be issues that will be part of our nominating process. 7 issues that will be coming that the local committee predicts will be coming before Congress that the candidates must weigh in on positions, and the constituency match up against those candidates. And this is a way to reduce a large field quickly. That you can use a thing called approval voting. Approval voting is where you can vote for as many people that share your values as you want. So if it's a free and equal election, you can imagine at the very beginning to be a lot of candidates. You want to be able to match up to them quickly and easily. So, if you're for it, we hope that people become 4-issue or 5-issue voters instead of 1-issue voters, but they'll be able to say, hey, I know this person. Mookie's running for Congress. He's put his stake in the ground that he's going to, this is where he stands on these pieces of legislation. And my prediction is that if you run this contest, you get lots of candidates, that you'll eventually get 4 semifinalists that probably look pretty similar to each other. I don't think you're going to get, I think they're going to reflect the values of that field. So when we get to a top 4, we're going to use ranked choice voting, not to pick a winner, but to pick a top 2. And then we'll do a final debate round, and the winner will always have more than 50%. They'll be the consensus choice of the district. And like, all contests, we expect that participation by voters will increase each round. This is 3 rounds of approval voting to get down to a top 4, 1 round of ranked choice voting to get to a top 2, and then 1 final debate round where you pick one and you get to a nominee. At this point, the super PAC would come in and back that candidate no matter who the district picks. But this would be the only time that the district has truly chosen their candidate.
So you're turning the entire model on its head. You're crowdsourcing it. You're truly democratizing it. And I'm sure our listeners and viewers are kind of like, well, this sounds great in principle, but isn't Tom breaking the law? Aren't there laws which create this system that we're all accustomed to and take for granted? And even if it's legal, we'd love to hear why you think this is legal, and I'm sure you've worked that out. How the hell are you going to pull this off?
That 2 great questions. Number one, the legality of it was a real question for a while. And what happened was I was working with an election lawyer, and he and the team working on it, after basically what he said, the only way to defeat this is to either ungerrymander the districts or get rid of super PACs. That was kind of his take on this. And they work with Republicans and Democrats. So a couple weeks later, I was conflicted out of the firm. I couldn't get, at that point, get a legal opinion. It took me 2 years to find an election lawyer that would actually cover it. But there is actually a thing in the federal election code called a test the waters committee. And that is technically what we're doing. We're setting up a test the waters committee for multiple candidates, not just one. And that committee will execute this process using local people to do that. And because we're in a gerrymander district, it's not really worrying about partisanship. This is going to be a left district or a right district. So it's going to be a bunch of conservatives or liberals picking the questions and overseeing this process. But they do not screen candidates. They just make sure that people follow the process. They'd be like an Olympic qualifying judge. We don't know who these people are. They have thankless jobs. We want to turn this into like Olympic trials for Congress, where officials, you know, administer this process, but the people do the choosing.
But they choose. And then why should the existing infrastructure listen or even care for that matter?
What we're doing is at that point, then we go on the general election ballot as a write-in, not as a write-in, as an independent candidate. So we would then petition for this. But the legality of this is really about not spending money. As long as there isn't any physical evidence of a campaign. And think about this, especially if you're in an opposition party and gerrymander district, why spend all this money when you could get your exposure through our portal? But the idea is that each candidate would have their own campaign portal, where they have their platform, they have their public service announcements, they have their, very positive message. We would see that as each round goes in, maybe the local committee introduces another question that they get to do another 30-second PSA for, create more contests, but create something that's a lot more compelling than getting a text message on your phone, donate $3. I mean, the parties don't use technology to really find out what we want. They don't want that. That may fly in the face of what their donors want. We're going to set up a party that's going to treat constituents like customers. We want to change the whole experience. And you talk about, how do I pull this off? I'm not going to launch this like it's a political party. I'm going to launch this as like a business. In a business, you have a business plan. All you need to do is get the next step. So where we are now is that we've completed our, there's four major things in developing and releasing a product. But the very first one is feasibility. So I worked with college students over the past year and a half in Philadelphia, kids at Penn, Drexel, Haverford, Temple, Swarthmore, to design the system and develop it. The kids at Drexel coded up the prototype. But um, basically, to take this through something that would have been more expensive if I had hired professionals, and the party doesn't really have money other than my friends and family donations to get it off the ground. So we are now in a phase where we're partnering with a group called the Digital Democracy Project, who is going to spin up the beta version of this app.
From the vantage point of a business model and a technological user experience, let's tacitly assume that this exists and it's on my phone.
Yep.
All right. Now, here's what's currently happening to your point. I get a text, donate $3, right? I might hear about the primary nearby. I live in Orange County, California, okay, which is kind of purplish now. And I usually don't participate in the primaries, right? So I'll just go to a local election, and especially the statewide and national elections, and I'll show up. And there'll be 2-3 candidates there, and I'll make my selection. That's my civic duty. Now, all the points that you're making up to this point, I think, are bang on point, which is there's filtering of this selection. I don't get my voice heard. There's gerrymandering. There's super PACs. It's a polarized big mess, and it's not true representation. So you're fixing this. How do you fix this with an app on a phone?
If you think about how we do contests like American Idol or how people try out for Congress, that there's an open field to begin with. We don't have an open field to begin with. So to do that, somebody who is interested in running, and to back this up, to make this practical, we are not trying to implement this everywhere. Our thought is to find 20 red, 20 blue districts. So your district would be picked as one of those districts. It may not be your district. And if so, there will be public service announcements say, if you're interested in running for office, download the app, Go to the portal,
Cool.
upload, load your information. You can run for office for free. You have to got to take position on 7 key issues, and basically do that. And one other part of this is you have to get 100 of your friends to endorse you to begin with. So to qualify to be on the portal, we have to know that at least 100 people are going to endorse you.
All
Now,
right.
as you can imagine, that if it's free and equal, a lot of people will run. So the thought is that in this target hypothetical district, if 50 to 100 people run and they each have to get 100 endorsements, you're going to have 5 to 10,000 people in the district already on the platform before the contest even starts.
That's very exciting. So right now we have one, two, three candidates. They're pre-selected, and we got nothing to do about it. You're
Yeah,
creating a platform where, look, bald-headed Mookie Spitz. I'm going to run on, the Libertarian ticket or my own ticket here in Orange
exactly.
County. I go on your platform, and as long as I have 100 co-signers, I'm like a legit candidate. And then I get a profile, presumably, and then I could put my positions on issues. Is
Yep.
that
There's
correct?
a whole, yes, there's
All
a
right.
whole place where you can put your campaign. But the idea is that if you've got graphics, you have the same number of pixels as your competitor. If you have audio, you've got the same number of seconds of audio and video. And if you've got a position paper, you get the same number of characters. So it's going to be a platform where all the contestants, and makes it easy for constituents. Now the contest launches, and what you got to do is make the top 20. So there's going to be a pressure. Now you can campaign, but you can't spend money. So you could promote yourself on social media. You're not to knock it. We have rules that we are putting in place to get rid of the things that people hate about the way campaigns work today. And those rules could be evolved. This has all been, like I said, proved out by me and the college students. Um, but they but the idea is to run a new form, and that the constituents hearing PSAs will know that they need to go on, download, put their positions in, or they could just say, hey, I know my cousin Mookie's running. I'm just going to find Mookie and just endorse him through the first 3 rounds. But through each round, you would not be getting text messages, no ads. Treat people with respect. Just get a little red dot on your app that says that, hey, the last round's over. It's time to maybe re-rank your votes or do participate in the next round. But
All
we
right.
want to make it that you could do this and just let it ride.
So I'm Mookie. I'm a candidate in Orange County, California. I register on your platform, right?
Hmm. Right.
America's Party, right? Main Street Party. And then I get a profile. I put up my positions, and then I can't put money into this, but I can go on TikTok, I can go on Instagram, I can go on YouTube, and I can say, "Hey, I'm Mookie, and I'm running for this
Yeah.
position in Orange County. I'm on America's Main Street Party, and you guys get to vote." You guys get to vote for me. Come endorse me. I've already
Yeah.
have 100, so I'm legit. And then folks vote for me. Like America's Got Talent, America's got a primary nominee.
Yeah, or this district is actually going to have somebody that represents them. And the party can advertise for the contest. The super PAC can advertise for the contest. So instead of them getting these awful ads, they'll just get a reminder, hey, download the app, spend a minute, checking out, exercise your voice. We want to try to do something different. So at least at the beginning, too, I think the people will realize they're participating in a democratic experiment.
Now, quick question. There's going to be, to your point, hundreds, if not thousands, if it's successful, guys like me, which is, I'm running. And how is the voting block going to really be able to differentiate and choose? Now, my nephew and my cousin will vote for me out of friends and family favors. But to really democratize this thing, people need to see my profile, go through my list of what I believe in and the policies that I want to see in my district. How are
This is
people
a
going to be able to differentiate and sort out from all of these candidates?
This is like I said, a brilliant idea that one of these college kids came up with. But the idea is that we're going to have 7 issues that they have to weigh in on, and that you'll go in, like I said, pick, say these four issues are the ones, and they're going to have a left, center, right position on those issues, and you're going to get now a subset of the people that match. Now if it comes back it's 30,
Cool.
you may say that, oh, that's too many, I'm going to pick a fifth one. Or you're going to say that anybody that has this position on this issue I don't want to consider at all. So we're going to have ways that you can filter out, because at the beginning you want to endorse not one person, you want to endorse as many people that share your values, because you want them to become a finalist. So
Right.
that's the idea. The districts can say, oh, yeah, this is the way approval voting works. It allows you to advance everybody that has your values. So as people drop off, you'd say, oh, I still have a horse in this race. Here's somebody that represents me. And then we can get to that top four where we get into the ranked choice voting.
All right, I love this. So you got all of these candidates, and they're on your platform, and they list their issues, and then you have like its own internal algorithm, which is like, all right, I'm a voter in Orange County, California, and I want less regulation, but I think smoking weed is okay, and gay marriage is okay, and I lean a little bit right in other ways, and then it cross references and indexes, and then I get a list of candidates within your platform that are aligned with my personal voting values. And it's not going to
Yep.
be just one, it's going to be many. And then I select them. And then it goes through a filtering process of stages of culling all of these candidates to what you're saying maybe four. Is that right?
Yeah, each week we'll do an elimination, and the first we'll get to a top 20. You'll get to re-rank. You could go in and say, you know what, I want to add some people here. I heard more about this candidate. I want to take them. So each round you'll have an opportunity to do that. So each week we'll call the field and eliminate it and give voters a regular amount of time, rather than just have all these silly ads for months and then vote once. I mean, we have a terrible system.
Yeah. I love that my voice is heard from the beginning to the end of the process. Like I'm
Exactly.
exposed to a wide playing field of choices. Your internal algorithm helps me align my choice with my own values and my own desire for certain policies. And then it gets culled based on the overall feedback from everyone voting, selecting. And then the people who bubble to the top, there's a much higher probability of them aligning with my real values, especially since my voice has been heard throughout the process in aggregate with hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people putting in their selection, culling those candidates. The candidate who makes it to the top as nominee is my guy or gal because I've been part of the process, as opposed to being completely out of the process and all the super PACs and the funding and the backroom conversations. I'm the one elevating this candidate.
And what it means to be a Republican or Democrat just seems to change once they get in session, and it depends on who the president is. So I think this is really a way to hold them accountable, say, hey, this is what we wanted, and we took these positions, and you need to take these positions. So if it's up for a vote and it's not that position, you got to say no.
Yeah, that's terrific. And then now what happens when you've got your four or five, whatever, you're called America's Main Street Party candidates who have come through your app? Why should the entrenched system in any way honor these candidates or even welcome them into this legacy political infrastructure? You mentioned they're going to be write-in candidates at
No,
my.
not right in. We will have to get, the way the general election works now is that anybody can, depending on the state, there are rules for getting on the ballot as an independent candidate. We are not yet a national party, so we would have to be basically get signatures after our contest for our winner to get them on the general election
That's
ballot.
what I was hinting at. So there'd have to be go back to a grassroots movement, if you will, that was engendered by this platform to get that spot.
It's not a big number. It's like a couple thousand signatures. Our goal
Okay.
is to outdraw the public primary. We want to advertise this, and through what we want is that final round, that debate round, that we're outpulling the public primary, so that when we say, hey, This is a person chosen over 5 rounds in a primary system that had more numbers, more people participating than this public primary. Now, who's the favorite? If this is football, we're the Big Ten, we're the SEC, they're the MAC. No offense to the MAC.
So when a voter in Orange County, California goes to the voting booth, all right, to make their selection, there's going to be a Democrat candidate, there's going to be a Republican. This is Orange County, there's going to be a Libertarian. There might be a few other fringe candidates. And then there's going to be the America's Main Street candidate.
Correct.
That's going to be in my available listing. And now the point you're making.
It'll be until it's recognized as a national party, that candidate will come up as an independent candidate on the ballot. But however, yeah, we're going to market that person as our candidate. We see America's Main Street Party being a brand. It's a brand that says that this candidate was chosen by the people and they follow different money rules. Our candidates are not going to be allowed to put personal wealth in this beyond what any other constituent. So if the donation limit is $2,700 for everybody in that particular office, then that's as much as they can contribute. They can't buy their office.
Yeah, and also I'm assuming that you're operating under the tacit assumption that there's been such a groundswell of enthusiasm for your independent candidate up to this point that hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people have already vetted this candidate,
Exactly.
are familiar with them, much more so, to your point, than the legacy Democrat or Republican nominee. So
Yeah.
when they go to the voting booth, they'll know that guy. So if I participated in this process and I was culled and I become America's Main Street independent candidate in my district, people will know Mookie Spitz because they've been part of the process organically since I joined the platform. And that critical mass should provide the momentum for getting more votes and squeezing in there.
Plus, the goal is to attract a large donor, a super PAC, who is going to back you. So this is what's going to attract good candidates. They're going to know that, hey, I've got 2 million in general election funds that's going to handle my media campaign. The candidate committee is just going to handle the local ground campaign. Now, here's another key difference about what we're doing. The way the system works now is that the candidate committees have all the power. They can accumulate war chests. And the more gerrymandered, uncompetitive district you're in, the more likely it is you've amassed a lot of money because you didn't have to spend it to win.
Right.
In our system, the treasurer, the person who's responsible, is not the candidate. It's going to be somebody from the local committee. And when that general election campaign's over, they are either spending all the money or they're returning it to the nominating committee, the local committee. So there are no war chests in this system. That person has to come back, go through the same nominating process, free and equal nominating process, to win the nomination again. That's a system of accountability we do not have today.
Absolutely. So this is intriguing on a number of different levels. So you're upending the existing system. You're empowering the electorate to make decisions much earlier in this process where they're usually completely excluded. And then the sheer momentum of their enthusiasm, you're tacitly assuming, will trigger a PAC, a super PAC, knowing that this candidate already has this kind of demonstrable grassroots support and get some money behind that
Yeah.
candidate. So they become a viable contender to actually win.
Yeah, we want to get the super PAC before the contest starts. So the idea of having the app in this beta form, having people download, we want to prove to a funder, a super funder, that we have traction and that our folks are going to win. And I think the key is getting the public to understand how this works, because we're trapped in this paradigm of how things work. And it is the hardest thing, challenge I've had, is getting people to wrap their head around this very thing. How does it really work now?
It all really boils down to the experience on the device. And you are offering a novel approach for grassroots democratization of the primary process
Correct.
as a precursor for the existing system to get in there and fund it.
Yeah.
And that's a very unique approach to doing politics. You're You're offering an app driven digital solution when right now there's just opacity.
Yeah. And right now, we've spent decades and hundreds of millions of dollars trying to implement election reform unsuccessfully. And the truth of the matter is we could overturn Citizens United. We could have ranked choice voting everywhere. We could have open primaries everywhere. Our election system would still be pretty terrible. It's still rigged for the incumbents to get these donations. So even if we implement all the election reforms that we have on the table, it's still a really unfair system. The only way to really fix it is to address the root cause, which is the way money works. And I found a loophole that allows us to do this without any new laws.
Right, without any new laws and without really upturning, in a sense, the infrastructure aside from scooting in an independent candidate who already has a tremendous amount of grassroots momentum as substantiated and empowered through this app.
Right. And we don't have to. The other thing about election reform, they're trying to change the system for an entire state, or what I mean, or an entire. All we do, we're going to go be selective. We're going to pick 20 red, 20 blue. We go any state, anywhere, and put this in, and just decide to market those districts, just like a company would test market a product in districts that they think it needs to go to figure it out. We're going to do the same thing: 20 red, 20 blue, where people feel that they don't have a voice, and upend this is.
I think it's brilliant. I had another guest, and we were riffing on the crisis in the Democrat Party right now around having a viable candidate who is as attention getting, albeit controversial, as Mr. Trump. And
Mm.
I proposed spontaneously during this podcast that we just do auditions. Like America's Got Talent, America's Got a Democrat candidate, and like record a little video of yourself for under a minute saying, "Hey, I'm Mookie. Here's what I propose." And then put me up, and I'm better than Gavin Newsom, say, or
Mm.
any of the other contenders at this point.
If you go to mainstreetparty.org, the very last FAQ is, could this be used for the presidency? And it's like, absolutely. The goal would be to, roll this out, eventually get into the Senate, and, have the country weigh in at one time to eliminate the field. The way we do the presidential primary, it's even goofier than the way we elect people for the House. It is the most archaic system. Both these systems are archaic, and it's time to modernize them. And the people in power will not let that happen.
It makes all the sense in the world. I mean, consider the 2016 election with the conflict between the Bernie bros and Hillary and
Yeah.
all the backroom intrigue. And there were millions of Democrat voters who felt disempowered by the primary process. And arguably, Trump won because you had millions of Democrats who felt betrayed by their own party. And this app that you're proposing, the entire experience around crowdsourcing that data, would preclude a situation like that. Ideally,
Right.
because you're giving everyone a voice, not only at the voting booth post hoc, but throughout the process, including the primary process and including that for the highest office in the land.
Yeah. And what we're doing is we're neutering party leadership. We don't want a party leadership that is making decisions for the people. This one thing we're right before we started, I wanted to get talking about James Wilson and the free and equal election clause that I at the beginning was really just about putting together a fair contest. And then a friend of mine who's a constitutional lawyer, he said, this is roots of this, and this is free and equal election. You're doing this completely. So I went back and I read about James Wilson, and a lot of people don't know who he is. And he is the person who actually wrote the Constitution. I mean, Madison gets a lot of credit for brokering the deal and making sure it came together, but the nerd was James Wilson. He was a guy on the Committee of Detail, and the four drafts that came out of the Committee of Detail were in his handwriting. And he and Madison were kind of recognized as the people of the Constitutional Convention who really understood the subject matter way better than anybody else. And there's a law professor, Penn, who did a research on Madison's notes and found that he's comparing like Madison's views coming into the convention with Wilson's. And basically, Wilson just wore them down over the course of the summer. That the Constitution really became his views of what he thought coming in it. And it all got back. They were both big believers in popular sovereignty. You want the decisions to go down to the people. In fact, he very first thing that came up at the convention, how to elect the president, and he's there like popular vote, even though they couldn't do it. And that was, what he thought it took, 100 years to get to that point. But they both believe that decisions need to be driven down to the people, and they would absolutely be furious if they saw the way our elections were handled today.
Yeah, I agree categorically, but I also want to bring up that backlash against the population. There was also an undercurrent throughout the writing of the Constitution of the unwashed masses. So the structure of our government, including the House and Senate, where it wasn't truly representative democracy because they were terrified of the uneducated common people making big decisions.
No, Wilson was the man, at least what I've read, who wrote We the People. And he wrote the Constitution in a language that was going to eventually include women and all colors of people. Like, so the language he used was very generic in describing who the Constitution was written for. It was written for everyone. And that is who they were. They believe that that the people, the best governments work when everything is driven from the bottom up. And that was really that's really what this system is about.
I agree, and we've come a long way in our 250 years. We're going to celebrate our big 250. But it was also engendered an environment of aristocracy, a skepticism about what the Greeks called the demos, right?
Hmm.
And also the conflict between the federal and state governments, which is
Right.
the Madisonian Hamiltonian conflict was significant too. So I see the tension as being along these two parallel lines, which is we can't trust the commoner to vote versus, to your point, everyone should be equal and free. And we can't trust the federal government with too much power because then the individual states will be disempowered. So I see that tension, and we're living with that tension to this day. And it's
Yeah.
created the paradox of the Electoral College, and it's led into some monstrosities, like even Citizens United. If you look at the SCOTUS decision from 2010, they're going back originalist style to the documents that you're citing too. So it's contentious, but in principle, I completely agree with you that the more information the people have and the more empowered they are, and now that everyone has this computer that we walk around with, and go on TikTok, everyone is bloviating on TikTok.
Yep.
So if people can do that, they might as well have transparency with key candidates at the
Well,
primary.
we need accountability, and that is really the key. So the story is that Wilson, you know, penned the Constitution. 3 years later, he was from Pennsylvania. He was chartered with rewriting the Pennsylvania Constitution, which at that time was a mess. And the Constitution that he wrote was generally copied throughout the Union as states came online after 1790. And what he added into the 1790 Constitution was unique. He added the words "and equal" to what up at that point had just been the free election clause. And in 1689 English Bill of Rights, that elections there were then free for anybody to run. But what he determined is that if they weren't fair, it would poison the system. And he described free and equal elections. What happened was he rewrote the Constitution. Then he had a inaugural law lecture at the College of Philadelphia, which became the Penn Law School. He's the first law lecturer of Penn. And his inaugural law lecture, which he did before George Washington and Governor Morris and the legislatures of both Pennsylvania and the United States, was talk about the free and equal election clause and how important it was. And he described it as the fountain of democracy. And if elections aren't free and equal, it poisons the system and it spreads to all aspects of government. And if you look at what we have today, having unfair elections has spread to all aspects of government.
Absolutely. And if digital technology has done anything, it's made everyone a creator. It's enabled two-way instantaneous global communication. and it also brings an unprecedented level of transparency. It also de facto brings an unprecedented level of manipulation and control.
Hmm.
So let's segue for a second on some of the technology hurdles of the
Sure.
platform that you're recommending. So the most basic one is privacy of information and information security. A more meta version of this is influence and meddling in results. We see the jockeying of crowdsourced voting, if you will, in
Hmm.
all sorts of other industries. Look at Polymarket, the gambling app, which in many ways is very analogous to what you're proposing. You can now bet on anything.
Yeah.
And with that, you have the people who are participating in what's being bet on jockeying the system for unfair advantage. How would you lock this thing down? How would you address the obvious privacy, security, and manipulation concerns of this kind of platform where everyone has an opinion and people do voting and the candidates are organically rising to the
Yeah.
top?
Well, it is a private contest for the district, and we are. One thing I was surprised about in thinking that we would have to invest millions of dollars and that we do not, which is um, voter security applications. That there is not just there's many options now out there. There's a application called Votes, which has been in use, I think, since 2016. It's a military application. It was developed for like um, service members on submarines or in war zones where they can't get physical ballots out of the area. That this uses blockchain technology. It's all encrypted. It's accepted in I don't know how many states, but and that's just one of them. There's also an organization called Secure Internet Voting that does this worldwide for other organizations. There's a guy, Brad Tusk, out of New York, who also has mobile voting technology. So, in terms of the security, the encryption, there are people that are worrying about that, and there are things that are currently being used here in the United States that guarantee that kind of security. Um, and
Yeah,
is to me a relief. And the guy I'm partnering with Ramon Perez at the Digital Democracy Project, they've implemented first in Florida, now they're in 7 states. A secure way for people to weigh in on legislation before their state house, and through the U.S. Congress, so that legislators can go back and say these are identified voters in my district who are voting this way. And as you get more and more critical mass, now you have this accountability and influence that the voters say, hey, this is the way we want it. We're telling you exactly how to vote on this legislation. We do not want this. Um, but ultimately, I think this is, if you do this and you can kind of break the financial bind to these candidates at the party level, I think you'll get away from this mega legislation that it'll get back to what we grew up on PBS. A bill's a bill, that they have to stand on their own and they have to pass and they have to get people, a majority of the House and the Senate, vote on it. It's not these huge packages where we wind up with all this legislation we don't want.
yeah. I mean, those benefits are pretty strong, and you've made great points. But when it comes to data security, that's a whole separate technology and logistical hurdle. And it does sound encouraging that you have these existing providers who are able to do that. Let's just tacitly assume that your platform is safe. All right, let's just take that as a
Sure.
given. As we know, Trump has been leveraging against mail-in ballots,
Hmm.
and he hates everything digital. And now the DHS raid of the Georgia ballots. There's an obsession with paper now as being the only thing that's secure and countable. We're in an age of extreme skepticism, which
Sure.
ostensibly has been created by the big lie, which is Trump's insistence that he didn't actually lose. And
Yep.
that's been shot down by all the courts. And even Georgia's paper tallies have been recounted 3 times. So we live in this environment, though. So now you're
Mhm.
proposing a digital backbone to crowdsourcing nominees.
Right. It's a nominating system. It's not
I'm
election.
just playing. I'm just playing devil's advocate in the sense that there's a backlash to digital being associated with elections at all.
I where it's all relative. The public primary is so unfair. So, you could say that, hey, if this comes through, we'll do the job. If you don't like the result, or if you think that it was rigged, don't vote for Mookie if he won. I mean, you still have the ultimate decision on election day, but the parties are using their own methods to do this. So we just found a better one. We think this is a better way to do it. And if they aren't going to improve the primary system, we can build a better one. And the data is
In
ours.
principle, I agree. I think it's great. And again, I have a healthcare digital background. We have a concept called the quantified self, which is on average, the human body has 37 trillion cells in it,
Yeah.
37,000 billion cells. And we don't know anything about our own bodies. And our own bodies are deeply personalized and unique
Mhm.
because of that complexity. And voters are complex. And voters have needs. And issues aren't just left or right or Democrat or Republican. Issues are nuanced too. And we're not able to get our voice heard. And you're enabling potentially millions of people to get their voice heard earlier in the process.
And to get voters to choose people on that. Because, like, on these
Yeah.
positions, the candidates actually will be able to elaborate on their particular position on that. So if they pick the left position on this issue, the constituent can hover over that position and then see that person's elaboration on that. So a lot of this is in their demos on our website, mainstreetparty.org. You can actually see how this works. It's what the alpha proof of concept feasibility is: demonstrable, not usable. In our next phase, we're going to have something that's usable but not really workable. It'll be people will be able to download it, feel, play it, participate in the, but we're not going to be nominating people yet. And then the last phase, we'll implement it and we'll do it. But we want to do it. We know that people already have it on their phones in thousands. We don't want to go and lose. We want to go and win.
So how can we help? I'm going to put all this information in the description of this podcast. And I'm assuming you want beta testers and you want to build awareness. This podcast will help build awareness, and I'm pleased to help spread the word about this concept.
Yeah, mainstreetparty.org. I mean, we want people to learn about what we're doing. I think the biggest thing is about wrapping your head around this because, like I said, we've been doing the same thing since we were born, and we have this two-party system that we're kind of baked in. And this is really, it took me a while to figure out that I'd really stumbled onto something. And
Yeah, I love it. I mean, the elevator speech for this is, America's Main Street Party has developed a way that you could be an active participant much early in the American political process. Your opinions can actually influence and drive a candidate who's more reflective of your nuanced views on politics, on policy, who will then get supported by the big money that would ostensibly just automatically go to a legacy Democrat or even Republican. And by participating in this technology, you can vote and vote early to influence not only the results of elections, but the people who will be nominated
yeah,
to be elected on.
right.
Join the cause. Is that
And
fairly accurate for what
it's
you're doing?
it's a process where the people will choose a nominee, and that nominee, the party money, will have no influence on them. Those party whips will not have any power. In our party, the people are the whip. That's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, and you got millions of Bernie bros who still feel ripped off by Hillary, who would have ostensibly welcomed an opportunity for their individual voices to be heard. They were silenced and they were angry by that. And even conversely, on the Republican side, there was a time when, especially after January 6th, that Trump's hegemony, even within MAGA, was a big question mark. And then you had candidates, most notably DeSantis, who tried to wiggle on in there. But again, these decisions were made on a high level, and even individual MAGA or Republican voters didn't have an opportunity to really get their word across. These were decisions made in the boardroom.
Yeah. And unfortunately, in our system, somebody who's an incumbent who decides to run for reelection, the money just flows behind them. And it's really hard for us to really unseat people. I've really come full limit on term limits. We want term limits because people can't get them out. But if you have a really, truly free and equal, fair system for electing somebody, you shouldn't have term limits because if somebody's not any good, they'll get voted out. And if somebody's really good, you should keep them. So, the idea that there could be a great statesman or stateswoman, that should be allowed. And if I think if you have a free and equal system and that person continues to win, then they're the best. They deserve it.
Absolutely. And then again, digital technology enables this with the caveats that you need it locked down, you need it secure, and then you need to combat these forms of manipulation within crowdsourced environments that are inevitable. So, you need to make sure that you police it, that you supervise it.
So we have a pretty cool idea of implementing what we're calling virtual polling locations. See, the original idea behind polling locations is that they were small enough that you could recognize the people who were there. The polling locations got so big that you can't do that. So we think we can do it virtually. So a virtual polling location could be an apartment building, or it could be your neighborhood, or it could be a grade school district, something where you really know the size and you could see it on a map. Green dot, Mookie voted. No, I didn't. Mookie's dead. He shouldn't have a green dot. So you could use a system where people could really police themselves to see that is my polling location. If it's small enough, they would know whether those dots should be there or not. So there's things you can do to modernize this that businesses are doing that the government's just really bad at. So, using this loophole, a business person and technologists are going to be able to come in here and upgrade this system
Yeah,
in a
again,
big way.
the analogy to healthcare is striking. And, in healthcare, we have the interoperability problem with the EHR and all those services where you've got all this data that's siloed. And the optimal system is for your 37 trillion or so cells to be transparent. And then you could get optimal preventative care, you can get optimal treatment solutions, and it becomes visible. The downside, though, is the insurance companies will see that, and everyone is jockeying to own the data because there's a lot of cashola in owning the data. And there's the risk of manipulation and corruption by revealing all this information. So you have this dynamic tension between transparency, which will help optimize by nature visibility, but
Yeah,
also efficiency of the system. And on the other hand, the opacity that's necessary for privacy and the ownership of one's own data. So you're bringing up interesting ideas, but the obstacles are the same in many ways too, which
right.
is I don't want people knowing if I voted, where I voted, how I voted.
Then they must be, if you're happy with the existing, people say, hey, I don't want to show my ID to get on an airplane. You got to fly, you're going to have to do it.
But
And um,
when you go to a voting booth, they got those big placards on either side, so people don't, look at who you're voting for. So, I love your concept. I'm just introducing obstacles which are inevitable part of building a system like this.
I don't know if you saw my history, but I started a company called Bookminders. We provide accounting service. We got hundreds of clients. We're, managing literally billions of dollars. And there are people trying to hack into the system every day, 24/7. It is possible. You can't tell me that people want voting data more than they want money. Mon- money is directly transferable. Voting data is not. So, the security that companies like mine and banks that go under that prevent these attacks, they're there. I mean, the systems are in place to protect the data. And I'm not saying that there aren't breaches, but there are these 99.9% of the time, they are working.
Oh yeah, and in principle, I've been a huge advocate of the quantified self and interoperability in healthcare for 2 decades.
Hmm.
But you get hit in the face with this kind of concern.
Right.
So to put a capper on it, I'm sure our listeners and viewers would like to hear a little bit more about you. You just brought up your background. So part of it is, what gives you the authority or legitimacy to propose such a solution, let alone implement it? And what spurred you on to want to reform the system? And how'd you get that light bulb go off that it would be in such an interesting way?
Yeah, it's interesting. I wasn't qualified for what my career ended up being. I'm I live here in Pittsburgh. I went to Carnegie Mellon, had an engineering degree, worked for about a decade in the field of factory automation. But along that way, I kind of stumbled. I was trying to help my father out with a bookkeeping problem right around the time the personal computers came out. And I set up my sister to do it. She didn't want to work in the office. She worked from home. And I came up with this idea of bookminders. We're now in, I don't know, 5 states and have 100 employees, but we run the accounting systems for small businesses and nonprofit organizations. Prior to that, I'd one accounting course in my life and I got a C in it. Um, and I was the least likely person to start this business, but I was looking at it from the business person's perspective. Most accounting firms were looking at it from their perspective. What do I need to get the tax return done? I was looking at what information they need to run their business. And we came up with a system that the customers loved. And in spite of the fact that at the beginning, accountants were really skeptical of what I was doing, eventually they became our biggest referral source. So, I had a background in an area of zero experience in this, but I was looking at it from a customer perspective, not from that. And I'm same thing here. I'm was sitting there during the COVID. I was concerned that we were going to kill each other over partisanship. I decided that if my business got PPP money, that I would do something. But one, I was not going to run for office, and whatever I did wouldn't require a law change. I wasn't going to get into having to do. I had to work within the system, and I came up with this ideas, and it really all throughout everybody's saying, You can't do this, you can't do this." Finally, the idea of using a super PAC to finance the winner, that was the key. Like, now you have an idea that if you win over a super donor, you can break the system.
Yeah, I think that that's like the bookend of this great technological solution that you're offering, which is
Mhm.
crowdsourcing earlier on in the voting process. I think the two combined together is a real eye opener and has tons of potential. And I have to bring up AI. Software as a service, SaaS companies are tanking on the S&P and Nasdaq. And as an accountant, you understand the pressure exerted not only by AI but now the agentic technology. And how might this factor in, both in a good or bad way, with the platform that you're proposing? We're dealing with a lot of bots. We're dealing with a lot of false information. And not to bring up the security consideration again, but I see a bunch of bots popping up as candidates on America's Main Street Party.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's why we're having a local nominating committee to vet
Right.
the process and make sure that the candidates are real and that do reference checks. So, to me, it's always amazing that you get these candidates that are out 3, 4 months and say, "Oh, they didn't serve in this branch of the military." That will not happen in this organization. I can tell you that as a person who hires, it costs $3 to do like a reference check. Well, that's what the committee will do. They'll just make sure that what they're representing is accurate. If they have a criminal record, they're not going to keep them out of the contest. They're just going to make sure that people know they have a criminal record. They may or may not hold that against that candidate.
Yeah, and you could sick the bots doing reference checks. Now it's even more efficient to
Well,
do it that
the
way.
AI does allow us to increase our capacity to
Yeah.
generate the code that we're going to need to do this, to
You could
do
vibe
our
code your platform,
yeah.
right?
So, it's going to allow us to increase our reach and to do, more things more quickly. Um, but ultimately, I do believe it's about transparency and giving people access. This is what before I started my accounting, same thing. It's about controls, checks and balances, giving transparency. When I worked in manufacturing, they improved the quality of the process by letting people know what went wrong. So I think
Yeah.
you have to be honest and say, if you do have a breach, say this is where it was. We can just rerun the contest. If we have something that gets messed up, let's just say it was a bad round, we'll rerun it.
That's terrific. And now that we know what the issue is you're solving, what the solution actually is in terms of the mechanics of the application, how that ultimately precipitates super PAC participation to back a crowdsourced candidate, I do want to go back and give credit where credit's due to the students and the folks who helped you build this. Because, now
Yeah.
we have context for what was built and why it was built. Can you just say a few words to give homage to the terrific students and everyone who helped
Yeah,
you
it
design it?
started off with these two guys who are now in law school, Gabe Wright and Tulio Tagliavera, and they um, they did the research. Like, I had the idea, I thought it was legal, but they went and um, did the research and wrote a document. A lot of this research is on wilsonsfountain.us. It's a website.
Right.
It's our sandbox for really exploring the free and equal election clause. But they basically figured out how to specifically operate this within the rules of the Federal Election Commission. And then there have been other students who've written other papers to do this. And then the guy who's really has been a key to this whole thing, a guy named Chauncey Wadsworth. He is our app designer. He's the one that came up with the idea about the issues. He's a political science major. He's not a computer science guy, but he's worked with the guys at Drexel on the app. And he's been working, he's been an intern on this for now a year and a half. He's staying with this project through graduation in May. But it's really what I've gotten out of working with these guys has really been a lot. I mean, they've come in and had some fantastic ideas. They've done some great research, and really wouldn't have gotten through this proof of concept phase without them. It would have the party couldn't raise the money to pay professionals, but they really did a great job. So
That's
thanks for mentioning
terrific.
it.
One of the themes of this podcast, Bald Ambition, is entrepreneurship and putting teams together. And you started with a light bulb idea, like you mentioned in COVID. We're killing each other with misinformation, polarization, just a lot of bullshit. And then you got this idea. How did you get to this point? Like, can you quickly share with our audience, how'd you go from bright idea to finding this terrific team and actually getting this as far as you've gotten it?
Yeah, and I think my experience launching businesses and products. I mean, my first job coming out of Carnegie Mellon was at Westinghouse. We launched a line of circuit breakers, boring thing. But that was really my approach, was that I was going to take more of a business person's approach, but launch it within a political committee organization. So on January 3rd, 2021, I formed a political committee, and then 3 days later, all hell broke loose. And it really kind of set me back in terms of, like, at this stage, I really hadn't come up with a free and equal contest. I just knew I wanted to do something different, and it stalled me. But it took a while just to get the website up. But again, taking more of this business plan approach. Then I had this eureka moment, really, where I discovered that this could be game changing, using the political committee system in a different way. And it was at that point where I really started to say, okay, I formed Wilson's Fountain because that is somewhere I could write checks for. I wasn't limited by the Federal Election Commission, and really underwrote a lot of the research um, outside of the party. And then the party, I'm just doing the things in it that have to be done, which is develop the app. And obviously any advertising, marketing has to be paid for by the party. But that was kind of the mechanics of going about it. And it really, it's limiting federal election rules to do what I'm doing, um, because I'm limited by money. And now I've got to get out and get people to become aware of it, make donations. We have some cool merchandise. We have some stickers and T-shirts.
Swag. The rock and rollers these days know that selling T-shirts is
In our
probably their number one revenue stream, right? So, swag, social media, getting the word out. I think the idea is terrific, and kudos to you for to make it happen and bring it about. I'm tacitly assuming, every force has a counter force. How do the entrenched politicians feel about it? Have you vetted this with, or at least proposed this as a concept with people in the system?
Yeah, if you're a staunch Democrat or a staunch Republican, you hate this idea.
Yeah,
And actually, even some of the people I think in the election reform space see us as competing for donors.
yeah.
Um, though we're trying to like really amplify what's going on with election reform by giving voice to things like approval voting and ranked choice voting. And we really feel like this is a market force that would cause legislators to ultimately deliver on election reform if they see this type of competition coming on. But that's really what we see is that this is, we're creating a market force.
Absolutely. And, the business guy in me thinks about ancillary line extensions here. Surveying and polling is a multi-zillion dollar industry, which, as we've seen, especially for presidential candidates, has been horribly flawed, right? That
And that's why,
standard that standard deviation got deviant in the last few elections. So do you see any opportunities for additional insights that could
yeah,
come
I mean,
out of what you're doing?
that was originally a plan that we would do that by teaming with the Digital Democracy Project. They're already doing that. So as we see it, we put our piece in there. Now we've got the full control loop. That they're picking up the data after the election. Telling them what we're getting it in the front end of what the constituents want. So to me, that delivers a full cycle solution by teaming up with them.
All right. So, I'm preaching to the choir. It's just I think in terms of data and AWS is what finally made Amazon profitable, and then the advertising on Amazon is what took them over the top. It's data is king, and then context is almost the queen of this. And if you're looking at this from a data centric point of view, sky's the limit for the amount of grassroots integration and reform you could bring about, along with the ancillary trove of information that you're getting and integrating with voters, right?
What's interesting about this, the party owns the data. The only income the party can take are donations that have donation limits. So we can't sell the data.
Right.
That's a great conundrum. We can't monetize it. So in that respect, the public, there's a public trust there that it's impossible for us to monetize it. We would violate the law by selling it.
I was going to bring that up, that there's a sense of assurance, at least on the part of your users, that, when Zuckerberg competed with MySpace saying that come to Facebook, we're not going to steal your data. That sounds hysterical at this point, but you really can't. And that's probably a good thing in this age
There's
of data heisting and reselling and slicing
there's
and
so many things that
dicing.
fall into place with this idea that it's and that's what usually happens in a market disruption is that the barriers that a monopoly uses, and think of the Republican Democratic parties as monopolies who've hijacked our election system, that the barriers that they set up to entry eventually take them down because the competitor figure out a way around them, not through them. And when they do that, now the monopoly is exposed to a better solution. And that is my prediction is that this will eventually put the public primary out of business.
I think that would be an awesome, awesome thing. Ladies and gentlemen, Tom Joseph from America's Main Street Party with a revolutionary proposal and a roadmap and an application for crowdsourcing your opinions and essential vote for upstream candidates prior to the election to build momentum and excitement from a grassroots kind of way. So the super PACs, where the real money are coming from, are actually going to represent you instead of just the legacy monolithic parties who are making all the decisions for us and further precipitating the polarization that is wrecking America.
Yeah.
Is that kind of a good pitch?
That's a great pitch. Go to
Check
check us out at mainstreetparty.org.
mainstreetparty.org. And thank you. Like, comment, share the Bald Ambition podcast. I want to sincerely thank you for your time. We're going to have info in the description, and be a participant. Your civic duty. And Tom here is offering a roadway to participating early, transparently, and in a way that actually could be truly influential for our elections, both at the local, state, and hopefully even the federal level.
Correct.
Right on. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Mookie.